readings. And you'll see that the PDFs that you've downloaded start with Gutman, and then we have readings from Rees, and then Kahn coming on strong. So I want to tell you a little bit about these readings and what to look out for in each of them. Gutman is a great place for us to start this class because he's showing us just how important the British are in developing modern sports and in shaping the context in which modern sports could be diffused throughout the world, including in the United States. So make sure you're picking out the argument he has to make on what makes modern sports modern and what he has to say about the power relationships that govern the transfer of sports from one place to another and why people adopt sports and why they don't. The conclusion to his book, which is the other part of what we're reading for this week, it has a very specific point to make on cultural imperialism and cultural hegemony. So make sure you're also paying attention to what he's saying about both those things, how he sees resistance or domination as forces at play, and how much one matters over the other, and why that means we should call it one thing or another. So make sure you're paying particular attention to Gutman's definitions on what makes modern sports modern and how they move about the world and what kind of power relationships are at play. Then we have our Rees readings, which start off with Hardy. And Hardy has a great story to tell in Boston. And while it's not everywhere in the United States that things happen exactly as they do in Boston, the history that he's telling us about with clubs, with the physical structure of the city, with parks, is really important to understanding modern sports in the United States. In Hardy, it's really important to pay attention to what kind of points he makes about the positives and negatives about the city and how the city itself shapes sports, right? For good and for bad. It's that relationship between the structure of space and how that affects social behavior, and vice versa, how social behavior, of course, shapes the environment as well. You can see this with parks kind of shaping people's understandings of health and what happens in them, and people shaping their urban landscapes to have more parks so they can get the benefits of magically being transported to this green space that's going to make the sickly into kind of strong, robust people. The Borish reading is also very interesting. It examines Beecher and Higginson and what arguments they have to make about men and women and what men and women need to do with physical exercise to be proper men and women, right? Now, these are prescriptive roles, right? And the reading is really laying out for us what the cult of domesticity on one hand and what muscular Christianity for the other have to say about the proper roles for each gender and what that means for their leisure time and physical activity. So pay particular attention to the role of religion, to kind of WASP culture, and to really kind of morality, the morality that hangs over all these kinds of conversation. And then the final reading is about the Chicago Race Relations Commission, I think it was called, and what they have to, the Chicago Commission on Race Relations, and what they had to say about what was happening in parks with African Americans and gangs of young white men who would try and drive them out in the city's public spaces, and how the fight over that public space and the role of sports in that fight really demonstrates something about the racial dynamics of the United States at that point in time, right? And then finally, we have a reading from Kahn, and the Kahn reading is from her book, Coming on Strong. And the things to pay attention to here in this first chapter are the things that the Borish article is also talking about, but Kahn really goes into much more detail about things like physical education teachers, women in college, the kind of modernizing experience that hung over this whole reshaping of gender norms. And the key tension there, and the really cool one to read about, is, can women be modern and still be women, right? That's the question that kind of conservatives in society are asking. If women embrace modern activities, of which sport is a major one, right? Does that threaten their role as mothers, as proper makers of the home? And does it put them in physical danger because of notions of the inferiority of the female sex, right? So pay attention in all these readings to how they relate to one another and to the four key concepts of the class, right? How is space interacting with the development of these sports, right? Parks, cities, where this is happening. How does race affect this? It comes out explicitly in a number of readings, and gender hangs over all of our readings in the chapters, except Gutman a little bit. So think about all those key concepts as you move through the readings.